Ladies, gents, non-binary friends, hi, hello, it's me, Nox. So I adjusted my microphone because I noticed that my previous recordings were very, very low. So I adjusted my microphone, hoping against all hope that this helps and that it's loud in the recording. Here's hoping. If it works, then I have figured out all my other videos and I can redo them. All right. Anyways, let's begin, shall we? Part 2. Thursday, April 2nd, 2:46. Written before baton practice. Some details of my work I do not want to write out. It is bad enough that they happen. I will record them in a general way, but it is more than I can bear to write each word of it. Last night, after supper, we went back to the night market. There was a cut purse. Tungsto longed for him and saved the purse, but missed the thief. Goodwin pointed at the runaway rat and said, "Puppy, fetch." I was gleeful. I could prove how good I was. I was after the cut purse in a leap. I chased him down Stuvik Street. My training forgot. I never saw his lookout. The coach stuck out a foot and I went flying. There'd been a cellar of fried food. On one side of his frying cart was the crate of fresh fish he cooked up for passers-by. On the other side was the pile of heads, guts, and tails left after he cut those fish up for cooking. I made my acquaintance with the pile full out. The cut purse escaped. Now it is day and my pride still hurts. I do not want the world to see me again. I do not want any dogs to see me again. My sisters, my brothers, Lord Gershom, all will have a tail by now. My lord will be wondering how he could have been so mistaken in me. Diona, Lorraine, Wiles, and Knight Nilo will do as brothers and sisters always do. They will never, ever let me forget this. Can Amat die of shame? I report back to the kennel tonight. If I don't just pack my things and head to the nearest ship away from Tortall, I will find out. Everyone who saw me clapped. Vendors, shoppers, street players, and rats whistled, stomped, and cheered, except my dogs. Tungsto was busy hobbling the lout who had tossed me into that mound of fish garbage. Goodwin just stood there, arms crossed over her chest, one eyebrow raised. It was near the end of our watch. Goodwin sent me to the docks to rinse off under the big barrels they kept for the fishermen. She ordered me just to go on home and care for my uniform. I fetched a change of clothes, then took myself to the bathhouse around the corner from my lodging. There I scrubbed me and my uniform. The attendants were more used to waiting on street women and players than puppies. They swore by the goddess they couldn't smell fish by the time I was done, but they smirked as they swore. I couldn't tell. I think the stench was burned into my poor nose. Passed over a 5 copper piece from a special jasmine and lavender bath, and soaked until I couldn't smell a thing. Then I went home and threw myself into my bed. I'll be known forever as the puppy who chased a cut purse and caught fish garbage instead. My descendants will pretend I'm not in their bloodline. No, no one will want to make descendants with me. I might have hid until I worked up the courage to run off to sea, but Pounce is determined. He washed my nose, he meowed, and clawed at my bedclothes. He dug all around me until he found a way in. His yowls were deafening inside the covers. Pesky beast, I growled, winding up the sheets and throwing him off the bed. You don't have to face the world. Will you waste all your free time sulking? He asked. Get up. When I stood there he was on top of the blankets. I wish I knew how he did that. I told you to stay home last night and not go playing off your tricks on me. I checked the bolts on my shutters. They were still fastened. What did you do? Magic them open? He just sat on the bed looking at me, head cocked sideways, his whiskers shoved forward in his small cat smile. I hate it when you charm me, I told him. I draped him over my shoulders. He purred and climbed around the back of my head and washed my temple. He stayed there balanced while I poured water in my basin and cleaned my teeth and face. Combing my hair was more activity than he wanted, though, so he sat on my lone table for that. I was probably smiling like a looby the whole time. I don't know why I'm so fortunate as to have this magical creature for my friend, but he makes things better, the little and the big. When Mama died, Hans comforted all of us, not just me. Today he eased my poor heart. I pulled on breeches, shirt, and boots and gathered my string bag and my belt purse. I had time to shop, feed my pigeons, eat, and still run away to see if I didn't lace about anymore. I was putting what I need for the day in my pockets when I saw the stone that Tansy had given me among my bits of things. I carried it to the window and opened the shutters. The mid-morning sun poured in as a couple of pigeons landed on the sill. While they made simple pigeon noises, I found the bag of cracked corn I kept inside the window and spread some on the sill to quiet them. Then I held the stone. The sparkling pieces were even brighter in the daylight. I turned it here and there, fascinated by the colors. The little red bits were the best. The only time I had ever seen red so bright was in the paintings in the great temple of the Mother Goddess, the day Mama took me for her blessings on my first monthlies. I kept turning it, finding a new spot that cast off light, until Pounce leapt to my shoulder and yelled, "Wake up!" in my ear. "Pounce!" I yelped. He shattered some glass bauble around me. I looked down. The pigeons were gone, their corn all eaten. The sun had moved enough that a shadow lay on the edge of the sill. "How long was I standing here gawping at the rock?" I asked my cat. Pounce said, "Long enough," and jumped to the floor. "Someday I'm selling you to the dumpling maker," I told him. I shoved the rock into my breeches pocket, then I closed and locked my shutters once more. Pounce and I rattled downstairs. As we passed in through the doors to the street, my landlady leaned out the window and called, "Would you bring me some fish then, Beka? There's a good Gixie." I heard folk laughing as we went down the lane. It's going to be a long time before I stop hearing that little joke. I heard 3 different types of it before I got to Biss's bakery. The one I disliked despite myself was how Pounce had done well for himself, making his home with a fish puppy. Old Man Biss grinned when he saw me and took my 3 coppers. The 4-day-old bread bin had been more than enough to fill my bag. Feels good to know that I can no longer get bread there for my family and that I can afford more than the lone copper's worth. I was about to go when Biss offered me a small loaf of bread in the shape of a fish. He glazed its scales with egg to bake up shiny. He cackled when I bit the thing's head off and gave Pounce the tail. "You'll show him, Beka Cooper," Biss told me. "I seen it when you was not but a peckle rawhide and eyes like ice. I see it now, fish guts and all." I shook my head at him and fled. I don't know where the old man came by such belief in me. How did he even tell me apart from the mumper children that waited around the shop in hope of a stale roll? But he'd known me right off when I moved back to the lower city. He'd offered me a fruit bun in welcome. It was why I had chosen his shop for getting my precious stale bread. Pounce and I wandered on down through the lower city. I do love it there during the day. Mothers sit on their doorsteps gossiping with friends as they sew, feed their babies, and buy from passing the vendors. The pigs are everywhere, snuffling in garbage when the dogs and cats aren't vexing them. The pigeons are everywhere too, hunting out food. Children run around the muddy streets and in the dooryards of places big enough to have them, playing games and chasing animals. Mostly folk here walk or ride horses or mules. No one came down here in a carriage. The streets are too narrow. The mud tracks twist and take quick turns. Now and then a wagoner might get lost hereabouts. He'll be stuck, and before he knows it, his cargo is gone. So too are his clothes, purse, and whatever poor beast pulled the wagon. There's always something going on, a deal, a birth, a wedding, a fight, lessons in summit or other. Folk are alive in the lower city, not bottled up like the merchants and the nobles. They laugh at what they find funny, and they weep as they are sad. If they have a little, they help their kin and friends, and they want better lives, however they can manage to get them. I'm just the same. I knew plenty of mots and children who'd been like Mama, at the mercy of a rat who thought no one would help them. I'd made sure that rat paid for his thieving. Who would do that for other families like mine had been? Most of the folk who lived here knew me by sight and to nod to, though I'd learned being a dog, even a puppy, made a difference. The little ones would run up to me, laughing and holding out their hands, yelling, "Put the cords on me, I've been bad." And their parents would chuckle, but the laugh never reached their eyes. Everyone in the lower city knew the goings-on that cracked the law. Even if they never took part, any dogs wanting to curry favor or make a mark could drag someone in for questioning and come away with a tidbit of nasty information. I'll not be doing that, I suppose. It's easy enough to bully strangers. But the folk of the lower city are my neighbors. Besides, I have sources most dogs don't. My birdies aren't human, but real winged birds and creatures of the air. I walked down Messenger Lane to the corner of Holderman Street. There was Glassman Square. Moths sat on the rim of the big pool at the center, visiting and filling their buckets. Other moths and gixies did laundry in stone tubs fed by the pipes from the pool. I bought 2 Scanner pasties with mutton, onion, and currants, sharing the gristly meat with Pounce. Then I wiped my fingers on my handkerchief and sat on one of the raised stone blocks around the square. As soon as I began to rip the first stale loaf of bread into small pieces, the pigeons came in hordes. They're the most common birds in all Chorus. Folk pick at them, dogs chase them, cats and children kill them, hawks eat them, and still they thrive. The silly things. They go everywhere, see everything, and serve the black god of death, carrying those who are not ready to enter his peaceful realms. Their colors are mixed. I've seen ones who are wondrous shades of copper and pink, and others who are almost as black as Pounce with a blue-green tinge to them. My old friend Slapper, who landed on my knee, is one of the blue-black ones. He had come to me first in my Lord Provost stable yard, yet somehow he had tracked me here. I'd named him Slapper for his bad habit of hitting me with his wings. He was also dirty and had a clubbed foot, a hunched back, and wide yellow eyes with the tiniest of pupils. He looked as if he'd accuse you of plotting to murder him in his sleep. I offered him bread. He grabbed for it. I've been feeding him for 3 years and he still doesn't trust me. And in the grab, he fell off my knee. I put down my hand and let a heap of breadcrumbs fall next to my leg. Slapper balanced himself on his bad foot and went to work on them. In came Pinky, a bird I'd met just a week ago, a silver and dark pink pigeon whose wings are tipped in snowy white. She is a bold wench, shoving her way right up to me. Fog is more of a pale blue-gray, with a blue-green collar and dark wingtips. White Spice is clean and white, perhaps someone's pet, with copper-colored spots from the back of his neck down to the middle of his wings. He is a handsome fellow and knows it, always strutting before the ladies. I have not named them all, of course. Like the pigeons who live around Lord Provost's house, they are quick to learn a source of food. It took these 50-odd birds but 3 days of my coming here at this time with my basket to know me and to gather when I began to rip up my bread. I wished I could say I did it for my love of birds. They are not pets. They are informants. Seated at the heart of this flock, I listened for the ghost voices. Pigeons cooed and chirred or deepened their throats again for food. Slowly, out of their sounds, the words of ghosts rose. Didn't know he'd come home so early, a moth's voice said. Why'd he come home so early? These dolts never tied doing the roads right. The cove spoke with a burr that comes from the mountain folk of the north. Sloppy work, sloppy. So sorry. I don't like this, Gary. That looks like a slave ship. I'm right, aren't I? You've been trading in slaves? The voice was the moth's, and frightened. Seemingly her folk belonged to the growing faction that hated slavery. Mama, I'm cold. Not looks right. Mama, they took me away. I didn't want to go, but they said there was a parrot and that I was sleepy. I want to come home. A dog ran through the pigeons, scattering the flock. I cursed as Pounce took off after the dog with a yowl, swinging his claws. The dog yelped as Pounce leapt to his back and dug in. Shrieking, the dog fled the square, Pounce still attached to him. I broke up more rolls, waiting for the birds to return. Unless a hawk was near, they would come back. They never forgot meals. Even the city's beggars could learn from them. And here they came. Recovered from their fright, I tossed out small pieces as they dropped to the stones, talking to each other. As they settled once more, the dead began to speak. I looked for the pigeon who carried the small child's soul on his back. There was a little girl and a little boy with me. They were scared. That was him. Lucky for me that after they're dead, even the smallest baby can tell its tale with a clear voice. Perhaps, as the priests say, the soul is ageless. Why did the hooded men take us, Mama? There wasn't a parrot. They lied, and then they made me sleep. They gave me porridge with bugs in it. And the entire flock took flight. I looked up. High overhead glided a red-tailed hawk. I sighed. It would be long before the birds came back if a hawk was nearby. My gathering here was done, for today at least, but now I knew something. A very young boy had been kidnapped and held with with other children. It could have been slaves taking his disliking course, but it isn't illegal. Kidnapping children without their parents' leave is legal, though. He could have been Tansy's Roland. Near 1:30 by the time I'd visited all my little flock. I had time to see Granny Fern before my watch. I helped around her house, meaning I did work and she went around after me fixing what I'd done, explaining how I did it wrong. We talked about Diona, Lorraine, and the boys as she made us a lunch of green pancakes with sorrel and ginger, then noodles with cheese. There was even cheese for Pounce. She finished with a winter apple tart for me, and this, she said, handing me a parcel wrapped in reeds as I was kissing her goodbye. I took it unthinking before the smell reached my nose. Fish. Why the furball? She said wickedly and closed her door in my face. For my furball indeed, I muttered to Pounce as we returned to my rooms. City's bells were ringing. 3:00. Today was the first day she's given you food. Just did it to score a bit of fur off of me. Pounce said, She's a wicked woman. I like her. You would, I said as we climbed our stairs. You're wicked yourself. I led us into my 2 little rooms. Pounce only looked smug and began to wash. I got ready for practice and watch. Night, after duty, as soon as I walked into the training yard behind the kennel for baton practice, the others began to jeer. I dumped my uniform bag on the side of the yard and picked up my training baton, wishing I could sink into the beaten dirt. It would have been bad enough only to have puppies to comment on my shame, but life isn't that simple. 3 years' worth of dogs were also there to talk about my smelly fate of the night before. Baton practice has demanded of puppies and dogs for 4 years of service, 3 for the goddess and 1 extra for Great Mithros. The higher-ups figure if you survived that long, you were getting plenty of practice on the streets. A group of my fellows circled me, sniffing loudly, saying the fish smell lingered yet. I thought about breaking the rule about no stick work and butt without the training mistress in the yard, but Ahuda settled that for me. She arrived unnoticed. She knocked the feet from under 2 of them and raised dust from the quilted jackets of 2 more with her split bamboo stick. Even with padding and her armed only with bamboo, they would show ugly bruises. She was that good. You think you wouldn't have been taken last night? She asked them. Not even when they hit you like this? Her baton went sideways into Hilliard's ribs. He collided with Marini, tumbling down on top of her. Or this? She got a second-year dog named Phelan in her next blow, thwacking him over the shoulders. She swept the baton so fast I never saw it move, slamming Phelan behind the knees. He yelped. He had no padding there. I winced as Phelan pitched forward. Quick as that, she jumped over him. Her baton headed straight for my gut. I blocked it, holding my baton vertical and 2-handed. I jammed my knee up into her side. She wasn't there, of course. She never is. Her baton slammed the side of my left knee. She was nice about it, though. I stumbled, but I didn't drop. On she went to Erskine. She showed everyone in the yard that it wasn't nice to laugh at someone who'd got taken by surprise. That afternoon, I would have sold an eye to be as good as she was. I loved her. She left them with no breath to laugh. After, when we had washed and climbed into our uniforms, Erskine walked over and hugged me, one arm about the shoulders. I looked into his blue eyes and smiled. Erskine handled my shyness from our first day by ignoring it. He liked to hug and stand with an arm about a Mott. And Mott's got used to it. We even treated him the same. I used to wonder how Erskine, with his soft brown curls and gentle eyes, would fare as a dog. Then we were called in on a riot at our outlaw's prison. He worked as hard and as tough as any of us, putting new learned fighting skills to use. He could be strong at need. You didn't need it just now. Fish puppy's going to wear off, Beka, he told me. The first time you startle them, they'll forget it entire. Besides, If it hadn't been you, it would have been me. I went full front in the gutter last night. I'd have been slime puppy for certain, if not for you. I giggled and gave him a quick hug back, then slid free of his kind arm. I wouldn't want anyone thinking I could not stand on my own. My welcome inside the kennel was as cheerful as at training. The dogs hooted and laughed when they saw me. "Hello, fish puppy," called Jewel. "Guess you'll remember that rats have lookouts now, eh?" Someone yelled, "Fish puppy, fish for..." Someone yelled, "Fish for supper, anyone?" Even Ahuda grinned at the others as the others laughed and whistled. I ground my teeth and saw my dogs. Tonsils beckoned me over. When I fell in next to him, I heard Goodwin sniff the air. I looked at the floor. Then she said, "A kennel. No place for a cat, fish puppy." I asked him to stay home, yet here he was, seated right in front of Goodwin, looking up at her with his whiskers forward and cat smile. Guardswoman, I swear I didn't bring him. I felt sweat trickle down my back. I swear by the shield of Mithros. Tungsto put a hand on my shoulder. "Don't call Mithros into a small matter with a cat, even a purple-eyed one, Cooper. I believe you." "You would not believe me if I told you the truth," I thought. "You would not believe if I said a great god might be the only one who could tell you anything about Pounce." Goodwin crouched and tickled my traitor cat under the chin. "You know you're a handsome fellow, don't you?" Tungsto leaned down slightly to whisper to me, "She likes cats." "I heard that," said Pounce, leaned into her scratching hand. "What's not to like, small lord?" she asked him. "Discreet, clean, following your own course in life. You take commands from no one, not even fish puppies." I winced. Pounce, the nasty thing, left onto Goodwin's shoulder. "Well," she said, and actually laughed. She straightened, Pounce riding her shoulder as he did mine. "It seems he's determined to go with us. He knows who to grease to get his way. This time he chose Goodwin as the one to convince that he had the right to trot along with us like the four-legged dogs some pairs took with them. I could see those dogs from the corner of my eye. They sat and watched my cat with mild interest. None of them showed any signs that they might chase him. "Muster up! Muster up!" Ahuda bellowed Ahuda. She looked as crisp as if she hadn't just spent the last hour thrashing us. Everybody formed ranks. "First item, no word on Cruikshank's great-grandchild from the assigned pairs on the 3 watches." Goodwin and Tungsto got some conversation there, including words with the grandmother and the mother. Nothing useful, but there may be more where that came from. Second item, tonight's collection for night. Birch and Vinehall, check each coin as it goes in your happy bag. No more counterfeits. Hobble anyone who slips fakes into your bag. The rest of you, keep an eye on your coins, too." I could see the 2 dogs she had mentioned, but turned deep red with shame. Not only had they brought useless coin into the kennel, but counterfeiters were worse than murderers. They could turn a kingdom's money to trash in weeks if they weren't caught. "Well, you curs aren't filling happy bags sitting on your rumps," Ahuda snapped. "Muster out. Not you, Goodwin. Tungsto, Master Folk has time for you now." I didn't miss the trade of sour faces between my partners. I didn't blame them either. "I had to ask for him," Goodwin said. She sounded almost ashamed. "If only so no one thinks we're holding back, rightfully ought to go in the happy bags for the split. You still have the sparkly fish puppy?" I dug it out of my pocket and offered it to her. She waved it off. "Give it to Folk. Come on." The 3 of us and Pounce went into the small office and served the mage on duty. There was Folk, perched at his desk on a chair that guaranteed he would be head and shoulders above any working dog. Mage Folk was a nasty, grubby little man, even on duty. He'd not shaved his gray-brown whiskers. His curling brown and gray hair looked like it hadn't been washed in a week or 10. It was his eyes I liked least. Green and full, too moist, with brown stains under them, like he never slept. No, I disliked his eyes second most. It was his roaming hands with their pinching and stroking fingers I disliked even more. Every girl runner and trainee did. I'd learned more than one junior dog complained of him, too. I kept to the back, letting Tunstall stand between me and the desk.
Well, where is it?
Folk demanded.
I haven't got all night.
I offered the stone to Goodwin again, but she jerked her head toward the mage. The look in her eyes said I'd best not vex her by hesitating.
You let a trainee hold this thing?
Folk made this word sound dirty, then smirked.
Trainee fish puppy at that?
We do when it's our trainee. We do when it's our trainee. Tunstall had such a warm voice, it was strange to hear it go cold. And whatever we dogs might call each other, you're not a dog, Folk. Give him the stone, Cooper. I stepped up. I couldn't make my dogs look bad, not when Tunstall had spoken for me. Then put the stone on the desk. Quick as a snake, Folk grabbed my wrist. He smiled into my eyes, his fingers rubbing my arm. I went still, thinking of the punishment I might get if I pinched his wrist until he bled. Let her go, Folk. Goodwin's voice was iron. The mage and I both looked at her. Touch her again, and I'll start an investigation on you for continued breaches of the goddess's law protecting women. I've heard whispers. Mayhap it's time I looked to see if there's anything behind them. Folk let me go. I looked at Tunstall, entirely confused. He gave me a smile. At the last eclipse, the mother of the Starlight Temple chose magistrates. Goodwin's now the goddess's magistrate for the lower city. She signs a writ, and the warrior mots with the shackles come for him. Folk grabbed the sparkly stone with fingers that shook. He released some bit of crimson that sank into it.
I'm a mage with power of my own, and the protection of the king,
he muttered, but he was sweating. Tiny sparks of light leapt from the stone, then dropped back into it. He held it up. From the look in his eyes, we were forgotten. It produced more red fire. It slithered over the stone and dripped to his desk. He muttered and passed his hand over the rocks, his palm trailing red light. The stone shimmered, then went dark.
Valueless in terms of coin, a curiosity. I will test it further, then report to my Lord Provost. You dogs are dismissed.
He looked at us and frowned.
I'm keeping it. Aren't you supposed to be making collections?
Hans leapt onto his back from behind his chair. Folk yelled and thrashed, dropping the stone and breaking the couple of jars on his desk. He scrambled after the stone, so did I, fearing that it might be fouled by the oil that spilled from the jars. The stone skipped from Folk's reaching fingers, spun onto the ancient floor, and dropped through an empty knothole in the plank. There was no telling where it had gone.
Folk screamed. That cat! Who let it in here? I loathe cats!
He sneezed.
Get out! I must make a summoning spell. Take that disgusting animal with you.
Sorry, I don't know why I gave it Medusa's voice. But it tickles me. Despite the jumping and shouting and the leak of magical things, I had to duck my head to hide a smirk. All Chorus knew Folk couldn't summon. If he could, he might have his own work as a mage, not cow work. Then I thought on the lost stone. I liked it. It was the best of the lower city, ordinary enough, with tiny specks of real beauty where you would never seek it. It was gone. Like as not, some four-legged rat was carrying it off to impress his lady rat. We left Folk's office, Pounce leading the way. What was going on in there? Sergeant Ahuda wanted to know. If you killed him, you get to find us a new one. He's alive and whining, Goodwin said. We're tired of playing with the mage. We're off to the court of the rogue. Goodwin and Tunstall were silent as we walked into the street. Pounce left us, seeing my dogs slip their batons from their belts to carry them two-handed. I did the same. As they settled into the walk that must be in their bones, I calmed down and began to think. With my brain working, I scarce noticed the calls of fish puppy from some of the folk we passed. The thought that had been waiting for my attention bobbed to the surface. Did my dogs notice the thing that I had seen? The light was very bad in Folk's lair. I was the only one standing close to him. Surely they had seen it. Still, my duty was plain. I cleared my throat. Speak up, puppy, Goodwin said. She never took her eyes from the faces around us. Tunstall kept his eye on the window above. He lied, I said. Folk did. He knew something big about that stone. You're good at observing, Lord Gershom had told me often enough. Tell people what you see. A good dog trusts what she observes. I had to believe my lord knew what he was talking about. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Bulk came over all greedy. He wanted the stone, and he didn't want us to know it was worth something. I could feel my face turn red and bless the shadows. I finished with a mumble. At least, that's how I think it. Goodwin and Tunstall halted, so I halted as well. Then they did an odd thing. Goodwin dug in her belt purse, and Tunstall put his hand out. Goodwin put a coin into it. Tunstall flipped it into the air, caught it, and tucked it into his pocket, and turned to look at me. I bet her 5 copper piece you'd pick that up. Goodwin turned, too. Her arms folded her chest. He's being nice. He also bet you wouldn't have the guts to tell us. So I was wrong twice. Yes, we saw. I screwed that up. So I was twice wrong. Yes, we saw. I took a tiny breath of relief. It would have been very bad for me then if I'd kept quiet. They'd have thought me either too stupid to watch folks' expression or too shy to do as I was told and report to my dogs. Tunstall ran his fingers over his short-trimmed beard. Otterkin said there was nothing to the stone. She's the same as Folk, Goodwin answered. If she could do more than charm mice from her flower, she wouldn't be a dog. Folk nearly wet himself when that sparkler lit up. She shook her head. Curse it, the stone was lost. God knows what's under the kennel. Snakes, maybe, mud that slithers clean to the river. The place has been there since the first king's reign. I heard a familiar yowl, blocked by something. My cat made that sound when he was truly pleased with himself. I looked for him. Pounce trotted between my feet and dropped something on my left boot. Slowly, Tunstall bent and picked it up. I didn't dare move as he used his water bottle to cellar slime, and who knew what else in the sparkly rock. I knew the look that Goodwin and Tunstall gave, first me, then my cat. It was the same look I often felt on my face when Pounce did something uncanny. He's just a cat? You're no mage or anything? Goodwin asked me after she'd been quiet for too long. Don't look at me. Just answer, Cooper. I found him in the Lord Provost's stable loft, guardswoman, I said, being as polite as I could. He was a purple-eyed kitten, and you'd have heard if I was a mage. Does strange things often, does he? Tunstall asked. Often enough, sir, I replied. I picked my cat up. Were there portents when you were born? Tunstall sounded as if he asked a normal question. Eclipses, eagles in the birth chamber, things like that. I was so startled I looked up at him. He seemed more like an owl than ever, though I never heard of any owl whose eyes twinkled with a joke. My papa lost a copper noble piece betting I'd be a boy. Mama says it was the last big coin papa ever had. Goodwin took the stone from Tunstall and dried it on her tunic. Why don't you and... Pounce, I said. Pounce, she replied. Why don't you two guard this for a while? Whilst Tunstall and me see if someone trustworthy can tell us about it. Because now we know a thing. If Folk wants this bad enough to lie and keep it to himself, then mayhap Crookshank's grandson Huron was right. Mayhap there's money in these things, and Crookshank is up to something. And maybe got his grandson killed, Tunstall said with a nod. Step closer and put the cat down, Goodwin ordered. As I obeyed, she bent to adjust her boot and slipped a stone to me. I tucked it into my breeches pocket as I straightened while Goodwin told Pounce what a good fellow he was. No one on the street would know I had the stone. Now let's get to work, girls, Tunstall said. Time to shake the tree. Other dogs collect happy bags from each business that wants to know, otherwise ill-paid dogs will watch over them with diligence. Tunstall and Goodwin gathered none of those. They called only on the rogue at the court of the rogue. We walked on west to the waking night market and the market of sorrows, where the slaves were sold. I hate it. The smell makes my stripes cramp. Too many families around Mudpiddle Lane come here to sell extra children to make a little money, if they don't try illegal sales for more. Up Koskinen Street, my dogs and I turned away from Sorrows, headed deeper into the part of the lower city called the Cesspool. where Mutpiddle Lane is. There are no street torches here, except those provided by drinking houses, outdoor gambling, and brothels. Houses are kept together with rope and magic charms. The pigs that root in the street garbage are rail thin. Hard and hungry folk with nowhere else to go hold the accessible streets after dark. Children swarmed us, begging for a copper. Once I'd been among them. Now they surrounded me, thinking I was new meat. I twirled my baton from the thong around my wrist and swept it around me in 2 half circles, moving them back. You crew don't go flopping your ticklers my way, I told them softly and cesspools. I'm no more an eye for you than the Lady Moon. They wasn't used to hearing their own gab from a dog. They scampered. My dogs turned to watch me, their faces a study. You do that well, Goodwin said. I looked down. Fish puppy, I'm talking to you. There was a warning in her voice. I met her eyes. 8 years we lived on Mutpiddle Lane, guardswoman. Goodwin, she corrected me. I suppose you have family around here still? Yes, Goodwin. My granny a few blocks from here. I was told something of the kind, she said finally. But it's one thing to hear the gossip and another to hear your own puppy talk like a cesspool rat. How many more secrets have you got, Cooper? I thought of the corner dust spinners. Mistress Knoll had already hinted to them about the pigeons. Very few, Goodwin. Good. I hate secrets. Don't talk cesspool can't anymore. You're a dog, not a rat. She set out again, hung still beside her, pouncing me behind. Half a block west on Festive Lane was a big black stone house. It had been a noble's place once when the city was new. As the nobles moved to other places, merchants had taken it. When they moved on, it had served as a courthouse for a time, then a kennel. For a long while, it was home to dozens of poor families. Now guards in leather armor stood watch around the 10-foot-high walls. Crossbows trained on the open ground in front of them. Torches blazed in iron holders all around the wall and on the building inside. Guards on the gate opened it to let us through without so much as a challenge. The rogue expected us. Inside the house, we walked down a hall filled with petitioners, armsmen on the watch for trouble. Thieves, rushers, them that sell their bodies, mots and coves, and the children of the folk who share the building with the rogue Kafer. Under the dirt and smoke stains, I could see the place must have been beautiful once. Someone went to trouble carving out the stone columns and wooden moldings. Now both were chipped, scratched, and smoke-stained. A lean spintree in a loincloth and not much else decided to amuse himself by teasing the puppy. Surely he knew I was too busy or too poor for his services, but he beckoned to me, flexing hard chest muscles. I looked away. It was a very tight loincloth. She's on duty, my buck, Goodwin said. Did she ever miss anything? Find yourself another playmate. I'll settle for you, Flower, he said, giving her a going over with his eyes. I love full-blown roses who know what a man is for. I have a man, and a real man. One who doesn't break when I play with him. When she grinned, all her teeth flashed. Then she shrugged and moved off. I couldn't imagine Goodwin having a man. Then I saw a familiar face, one I never thought to see in the court. I cleared my throat. Tunstall glanced at me and saw where I'd looked. Spoke to Goodwin before he strode over to Mistress Knoll. Grandmother, I'm shocked, he said, bending down to kiss her cheek. What brings you to so nasty a place? Maggots in my flour. My merchant says the rogue buys his best now, said, her face sour. Taking advantage of an old woman making her way in the world. I say, I left Gemma with my stall and come to make my plea to the rogue to send some of the good flour my way. I'm sure he'll want something for his trouble. He always does. Alone? Goodwin asked with a frown. Goddess never. Mistress Knoll pointed to just inside the hall. One of her sons and another cove were talking with one of the guards in quiet voices. Yates and his friend came with me. It's good to have one son who still lives in chorus. She lowered her voice. How did your visit with Crookshank go? As well as you'd expect, Tunstall replied. I heard Beka here got to see her old friend Tansy. Mr. Snow's eyes twinkled as she looked up at Tunstall. You knew Beka and Tansy Loss were friends? Goodwin asked. They used to play on my street, Mr. Snow said. That Tansy was a pert gixie, wasn't she, Beka? But pretty as a flower even then. Gal knew she'd catch some lucky cove's eye. I think Yates finally got the right lad to bribe. To be sure, Yates was beckoning to her. She went to him. I looked at the floor. Didn't Mr. Snow have words with Tansy once or twice? And what if she had? Mr. Snow's a mother. She'd speak kindly of a mott who'd lost her first child. Anyone would. Let's go, puppy. Time to show off that uniform. Goodwin told me. Chin up. We're here in the name of the Lord Provost. She must have guessed that would be the spell to put iron in my spine and bring my head high. I could walk bold for the man who had taken my family out of the cesspool. Sounds kept well back as we entered what must have been the great hall in the days when nobles had lived here. Now it was the rogue's throne room. The chiefs sat at tables near one end of the room, their doxies and rushers around them. On a platform inches above the floor, at a level with the broad hearth, was a fellow I guessed to be the rogue himself, Cafer Dearborn. He sat on a throne made of cobbled-together crates, wooden barrels, and pieces of furniture. There he talked with the brown-skinned Carthaki woman in breeches and a shirt. There were tattoos around her eyes and ruby studs on the rim of one ear. She had the look of a slave trader to me. Two more Carthakis waited just off the platform at her back. The one in a slave's collar held the leashes of two big mastiffs. He was even more muscled than the mastiffs. Waiting there for Kafer to notice us, I took a chance to fix him in my memory. All of the cesspool's older women said how broad his shoulders were at one time, how blue his eyes, how quick his smile. I saw a flabby cove in his early 40s with a smooth arch of a nose, who was losing his short brown hair. His eyes were very blue with plenty of lines around them. He wore a black pearl drop as big as my thumb in one ear, a silver hoop in the other, and a gold ring with a sapphire the size of a pigeon's egg on his right index finger. There were tales about how he got that gem. The smile was well enough. Hafer clapped the coast slave trader on the shoulder. She unhooked a purse from her belt, but she wasn't so rude as to hand it to him. Instead, one of Kafer's moths guided her to a small room on the other side of the hearth. The trader's guard, slave, and dogs followed. The rogue beckoned to one of the chiefs who was standing. We get to wait, Tunstall said, his lips barely moving. It's how he proves he's still the rogue. Some rogue, a familiar voice drawled. We looked to our right, the bone-pale cove from last night, and his two ladies sat against the wall with the rushers who served the rogue and his chiefs. Sits on his arsehole like a sardine king and bribes others to stand for him. I'd hoped for someone livelier in charge here. Goodwin glanced at Kafer. He was whispering with the chief who had gone up to him. Tunstall ambled over to one of the female chiefs. Ulsa, her district was Pretty Bone, across the river. Ulsa grinned and nudged out a chair for him with her foot. He took it. Goodwin sat on her hunk of bones in front of the pale cove. His right hand, Mott, the small one who was as sleek as a cat, sat on his side with her ankles crossed, fingering her gown. I thought her hand could reach her knife for a curious set of coins knotted in crimson thread that hung from her belt. These looked like magic. The big blonde Mott at the man's left only leaned back against the wall, one hand dangling from her propped-up knee. Now, laddiebuck, Goodwin said, friendly as a rat about to eat her young, why don't you tell me what kind of lively you're looking for? I'll direct you where you can find it, away from chorus. He smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. He gave her the same kind of smile. Then he looked at Tunstall, who had made the Pretty Bone chief laugh. Lastly, he looked at me. I turned my eyes away. The cat Mott nudged him with her shoulder. Stop it, Rosto, she said. Fidget someone who fidgets you back. She nodded to Goodwin. He's Rosto the Piper. I'm Cora, and that's Nicky. The blonde, who looked to be a swordswoman, raised a lazy hand in greeting. We heard life was more interesting in chorus, so here we are. He gave Goodwin a friendlier smile by far than the one Goodwin gave her. Scavengers always come looking when they hear Scavengers always come looking when they hear of a feast. So far, it's been long put off, Goodwin told them. For his chiefs have done away with many challengers. Oh, we're not looking to challenge, Rosto said. We hope to be entertained. Scanner was that bare of entertainment. He's a fine-looking cat, Nikki said. Pounce had arrived. He sauntered up to her. A very handsome, elegant, she gulped. Purple eyes? Cora said quietly. Odd-colored eyes, and the creature means it's God-marked. He leaned forward and stroked my cat, who butted his head against her palm. He is soft on mages. He's the puppies, Goodwin said, watching them. He's a clever beast. Pounce gave the ripple of mirth that was his laugh, though I was the only one who knew it. Foster looked past us and raised his eyebrows. Hello, what's this? In walked Crookshank, gaunt, unshaven, hollow-eyed. His narrow leggings were wrinkled, as if he'd slept in them. His knee-length tunic was a little better. There were stains on it, too. His black hair was snarled. Two of his manservants followed him, empty sword and dagger scabbards in their belts. The guards had taken their weapons. Punksta left off talking to Ulsa and came to stand by us. Goodwin rose, too. I placed myself at Goodwin's elbow, making sure I did not block anyone's view. And Nikki, who was nearest to me, winked. Kafer, Kafer! You two-faced scummer! We was partners! Screeched Crookshank. Even a sucking leech like you should have been content with your share, you greedy, gutted spintree. The rogue stood on his platform, rubbing the top of his head. I beg you, Almond, calm down, he said, his voice soothing. Whatever your grievance with me, we can surely sort it out. Grievance? You call my great-grandson's murder grievance? Crookshank yelled, pointing at Kafer, his bony finger quivering. What kind of monster takes a weak child from his family and murders him for profit? Did you think you could hide behind notes smuggled into my house and I would not suspect you? Kafer stepped down off his platform, both hands out, his face as sorrowful as a professional mourner's. Amun, I know it is your grief which makes you say these things. Butter just melts on his tongue, doesn't it? Rosto murmured. Bad laddie, Nikki told him. Hush, listen to a master work. I glanced at Goodwin and saw the corners of her mouth twitch. I began to think mayhap she liked these three impudent rascals from the north. Of course it's my grief. Stormwings take your eyes, screamed Crookshank. Your shadow snake murdered my Roland when he was not in our business. Tears rolled down his face. I almost felt bad for him. And I remembered that he kicked my cousin Lilac's family from their lodgings when she was having a bad time, and Lilac lost her baby. Moon, Shadow Snake is a boogie to frighten children. The rogue's voice was as smooth as warm oil. You must be cracked spun with grieving to say I'd deal with a monster out of tales. And as for me, of all sea folk, sending anyone to harm a child. His voice cracked when he said child. Amun, I swear on the names of my own grandbabies, I did not do it. Kafer's blue eyes were steady on Crookshank's brown ones. They did not waver. Not a muscle of his mouth twitched to give away a lie. I suppose the rogue would have to have been the realm's best liar, but I believed him even so. Kafer went on. In the name of the bright mythos and the goddess herself, I swear it. I would never bring such harm to any family of yours. We depend on each other, O friend. I never conjured up a nightmare like the snake. I never gave the task of murdering your little cove to any of my chiefs. My chiefs would never do such a thing at my bidding. Cursed right we would not, cried Dobble, the huge red-headed chief who had the waterfront district on both sides of the river. Kafer shot him a glare, but Dobble only smiled. I wondered when Dobble might decide that a rogue's take from all the chiefs might be better than most of the takes from only waterfront district. Crookshank spat on Kafer's feet. Liar! He glared at everyone in the room. You're leeches living off of the rest of us and feeding this oath-breaker. His voice rasped with exhaustion. Look at the lot of you! He swung his hands wide. Sitting here lapping up drink and food like caged birds. I curse him. If you take his orders and protect his throne, then I curse you in Roland's name. You best mind your children. Crookshank, you're mad, also cried, "There is no such creature as the shadow snake." Kafer snapped his fingers, calling his rushers. 4 of them seized Crookshank's guards. Another grabbed the old man by the arm. Kafer stepped closer to Crookshank. "It is terrible what happened. We all are sick with sorrow for it," he said, his voice quieter. "But why you, Amun? Why might someone calling himself Shadow Snake target your house, your family? What tidbit has come into your hands of late? Why have you not offered a taste to your rogue?" Crookshank lunged at Kafer with a knife he'd pulled from the folds of his tunic. The chiefs jumped to their feet with a roar, trying to get to the rogue before his throat got cut. But it was Rasu who got there first. He was a blur, as quick as Sergeant Ed Huda. He'd been waiting. Had he been waiting for it? Or had he just been ready to move at need, like the sergeant was always telling us to do? "Quick little spintree, isn't he?" Nikki asked, her voice just reaching us dogs. "You should see him swarm up a house wall. A thing of beauty he is." "I'll pass on the house wall, thanks so much," Goodwin replied, her voice the same kind of quiet. "I'd hate to arrest such a pretty fellow." "He promises to be interesting if he manages to live," Uncle murmured as Rosto plucked the dagger from Crookshank's hand and gave it to one of Kafer's rushers. Only after Rosto searched Crookshank did he let the old man up. He was very good. Those who didn't have the same point of view as we dogs would not have seen Rosto slip something into his own left top. "Oh, well, living," Cora said. "Aniki, a silver... what's that local coin? A silver noble that the big red-headed chief is the first to offer Rosto a job." "Done," Aniki replied Aniki. "2 silver nobles. It's also the chief of Pretty Bone," Uncle said without turning to look at them. "She likes handsome coves that know what they're doing." He glanced back at them. "Even more if they have pretty mots who know what they're doing." Aniki reached up, offering her palm. "Bet." Uncle turned and clasped it. "Bet." Rosto was sauntering back to his hands in his pockets. "Puppy? Fetch." Goodwin ordered me in a voice that just reached my ears. I couldn't believe she would say that to me after the night before. Then I steeled myself. I knew what she wanted. I had to redeem myself. "Goddess, please don't let me fumble," I prayed, turning my baton in my fingers. I went to rearrange it on my belt as Rosto drew level with me. I dropped it on the floor and lunged for it right across his shins. Quick as he was with my body in the way, he didn't see I put my baton between his feet. Down he went as I turned, making us a tangle of baton, puppy, and Rosto. "Dear, if you'd asked, I'd have considered it," he muttered as he tried to undo us. "You're a pretty thing when you look a cove in the eye." I stammered apologies, seemingly trying to get my baton untangled from his legs. That was a trick to manage. With him being so nimble, he almost freed himself twice before I thought we'd been at it long enough that he'd be too flustered to think to check his boot top soon. By the time we stood, Dowell Waterfront led the guards as they dragged the screaming Crookshank from the hall. The chief now went to Kafer to congratulate him on his escape. Goodwin came over to straighten my clothes and scold me for my clumsiness. As she did, I passed her the leather-wrapped lump that had been in Ross's boot. "Now, Clary, the pup can't help it," Funksta said, watching us. "Her second day, after all. She's yet to get used to things breaking out sudden-like." He knew something was up. I saw it in his eyes. I met his gaze and raised my brows, flicking my eyes beyond his shoulder to warn him we were about to have company. Goodwin saw me do it and turned. So did Tunksel. Kafer nodded to them as he passed us. He offered his hand to Rosto, whose mots fussed over him, tugging at his clothes. With the rogue standing there, they stepped back to take positions just behind Rosto. Nikki hooked her hands in her sword belt. Cora folded hers before her and lowering her long lashes. Rosto took the hand that Kafer offered. "The least I could do, Majesty. I saw the knife shape against the old cuckoo's tunic. Sad work your guards done searching him, you ask me." Kafer's smile had a lot of friendliness in it. "You've a good eye. Are you and your Gixies here looking for work? My gate crew goes for a swim tonight unless they can convince me they'd make their way back to my good graces as wounded mumpers." I winced. A choice between death and life as a maimed beggar was a hard one. "Majesty, you're not talking of breaking the law and violence before 3 dogs, are you?" Uncle asked. His voice was so polite he might have been speaking of temple services. We can't have that on our watch. Not when we're standing right here. Hafer looked up at Tunstall and laughed. Never a bit, Mats, Tunstall. Why don't you and Goodwin come settle our business? Young Rostow and I can talk later. Maybe extra sweetening will make it into this week's happy bags. To assure you I'd never do violence with the dogs out. He glanced at me and then pinched my cheek. Leave the puppy. She doesn't look like she'll last. I clenched my jaw so tight I heard my teeth creak. He led Goodwin and Tunstall back to his precious throne. I took the rest position, baton gripped two-handed before me, my feet braced to forearms width apart. Those who'd heard Kafer enjoyed a laugh at my expense before going about their own business. A nice trick lifting that pouch for me, Rasta stood at my elbow. If you're a fish puppy, like the gossip says, it's because you're so slippery. I don't suppose you'd take a silver noble to tell me what it is, once your dogs have a look. From the feel it's gems, but it never hurts to be certain. I forgot myself enough to glare at him. His eyes were mocking. I looked away just as quick as I'd glared. It was one thing to trip the cove on Goodwin's orders, and another, quite another, to talk to him. Besides, I was on duty. Not taking offense over a bit of bribery, are you? There was mockery in his voice as well as his eyes. On the very night your dogs are here to collect their bribes from the rogue. I glared at the floor this time. I expected a cityman to talk so foolish, not an experienced rusher. That's different. That's for all the work every one of us does to keep the streets orderly. You're asking me to sell out my dogs. I saw his booted feet rock back on his heels. Hello! It has bark and bite. He sounded startled. Here, I was thinking you're a mousy little bit. But you're not mousy, are you? Seeing the start of movement, I blocked his arm before his slap touched my face. I turned my hand around to grip the inside of his wrist. When I found the gap between two of his tendons there, I dug my thumbnail deep into it. Ow! He said, trying to yank free. I'd put my hand so the harder he tugged, the deeper I could thrust my thumbnail. Rostow, you take shy as fearful. Why would a coward become a dog? There's easier ways for a pretty Gixie to make a living. And Nicky propped one elbow on Rostow's collarbone and leaned on him, like he was a convenient post. She smiled down at me. Normally, he's not thick about moths, but he's slow when they're not in love with him. Me and Cora had to knock him around until he got us figured out. Say you're sorry, Rostow, and don't try to bribe the nice puppy again. I'm sorry, all right? I'm bleeding! I had broken his skin. I took my hand away and wiped my thumb on my breeches. That was the good thing about black. It didn't show stains. It was easier to look into Nicky's smiling blue eyes than Rostow's, I told her. 2 days as a dog and out of my first bribe offer. I think it's a record. She laughed and cuffed Rostow lightly. She's shy, cabbage head, not stupid. Rostow had a handkerchief pressed to the wound I'd left in his wrist. So I'm learning. What's your name then, shy, not stupid puppy? I told him my name. There was no reason not to. Besides, I had a feeling that I'd see these three again. If Kafer didn't decide it was to his advantage to kill such talented new people, they might rise high in the court of the rogue. I saw movement at my side. Cora stepped in next to me, cuddling Pounce in her arms. I'd heard folks say last night that your mother was an herbalist, she said. She had a soft, pretty voice and demure eyes. So then you might be able to tell me where I could get good dried and fresh herbs, the reliable sellers. We're still learning our way around with so many markets I hardly know where to look. It was odd to speak of something innocent. Odd but nice. Rostow had an interest in the subject of herbs, more than I expected of a cove. He even argued with Cora about the benefits of dried chamomile against fresh or light for lightening hair. Nicky drifted away to play dice with some of the rushers. So, Cooper, Rostow said after Cora had thanked me, how quick is this rogue to wield the whip? When I looked at him and waited, he explained. That Crookshank fellow, what did the rogue call him? Almoon, I said. That's his birth name, Almoon Lofts. It's in the streets he's called Crookshank, Scale and Landlord. Almond lost, Roscoe said. Him. Your rogue daren't let him go unpunished, can he? Not after Master Lost called Crookshanks. Spits at his feet in front of the whole court. I know as well as anybody Crookshank might pay for what he'd done. Must pay for what he's done. But it's been 3 years since Kafer pulled up and belted his own breeches. It was a folly to say as much, though. You'd have to ask the rogue, I said at last. How was it done in Scanra? Right then and there, Roscoe told me. The one time I saw it done, poor fool was drunk. Not that it stopped our rogue. He went on with the story. It was Cora to put in the bits he left out about the rogue for Scanra. At last my dogs returned, their packs with the happy bags heavy on their backs. Roscoe and Cora nodded goodbye as Pounce and I fell in behind them. As we walked out of that house, I felt visible. The rogue's happy bags had more than just the coin and bribes paid to the Jane Street kennel. They also held gems, fine statues, magical devices, and other items. Now we walked into the cesspool of fortunes on the backs of my dogs. They do this every week and live? The hair prickled on the back of my neck. Surely this was asking a great deal even from them. Usually pairs took the bags to collection points, where armed crews gathered the week's earnings to be split among the dogs. Did we have such a crew? I wanted to ask, or did we carry the rogue's bags alone to make a point about his power in the cesspool and ours? What if the dogs thought that no one would dare to try to rob the rogue's own bags? Stop sweating, puppy, Goodwin told me as the gates closed behind us. It's a thing of pride to go in there and come out on our own. The rogue's always knowing that. If anything happens to the dogs who call for the happy bags, his stronghold will be ashed by dawn. Some laws a madman breaks, but we're not stupid. A block away, fag dogs with horses waited for us. 3 were mounted and armed with crossbows. I knew them. They were part of the guard who served my Lord Gershom personally. Corn had taught me to use a crossbow. He grinned and nodded to me. The 2 guards on foot I knew from the Jane Street kennel. They took the packs from Tunstall and Goodwin with a little conversation and looked at me. She managed her first visit with the rogue and his milk-fed geldings, asked one of them. She did well for us. We'll keep her, Tunstall said. Tunstall told them. Run along, children. We have work to do yet. And Yehuda doesn't like to wait. They trotted off into the darkness of the lower city. Goodwin was still watching them when she asked me, So, did he try to bribe you, Roscoe? Yes, I replied. He wanted to know what was in the thing he took from Crookshank. I'll have a look over supper, Tunstall said. Very nice work with the baton, Cooper. I liked how you shielded it with your body so he couldn't see you use it to tangle him up. You outthought him. I shook my head, and Tunstall saw it. You planned for him being better than you? I nodded. Smart puppy, he said with approval. You've earned your supper again for the night. Well, she has a while till she gets it, Goodwin said, making sure her gorget was fastened. Tunstall was doing the same. We have a way to go before we can think of eating. She pulled out the gloves that tucked into her belt and put them on. They had mail stitched onto the backs and palms. Then she strapped her wrist guards over the edges of her gloves. Tunstall's gloves had metal straps on the backs instead of mail, though he had mail over his palms. Goodwin looked me over. We need to get you a gorget, Cooper, and proper gloves. Leather isn't good enough in the cesspool. Stick close to us for tonight. I'll see to the gear, Tunstall said. He clapped me on the shoulder. It may take a couple of days. Should be quiet with all the other chiefs and rushers in for the happy bag, Cooper. They like to frolic in the cesspool as Kafer turns them loose to show who's on top and who's low down. Most folk will keep out of sight. I soon realized that Tunstall's idea of a quiet night and mine are different. By the time we reached Mulberry Way, we'd stopped 3 robberies, 2 casual beatings, and 2 tavern brawls. At least my dogs did. I was ordered to stand off and watch. It was an honor, so neatly did they work. We hobbled no one. My dogs found no one worth the trouble. They explained what they did as they did it, so I would learn. The robbers got a broken arm each, since they attacked only for coppers. They would pay more to healers than they had hoped to get from their victims, who fled as soon as my dog stepped in. In the cases of beatings, Goodwin and Tunstall administered broken fingers to several of the rushers involved. They broke one rusher's hand. because he worked for a slave trader who liked to force folk to sell to him. Those victims ran away too. In the case of the tavern brawls, my dogs simply kicked everyone out. They did let me hold on to two of a gang of boys who had thought torturing a piglet was a night's fun. Hans led the piglet away, while Goodwin delivered business-like paddlings with her baton. I gave her my captives when their turn came, for a lesson came. Those guts would wish their mothers had taught them better, limping for some weeks after the unkind kiss of the dogs waited. On we wandered. Most of what we saw up this way was owned by Crookshank, Tunstall said. Thousands of families had him for a landlord. He could be rich on their own coin alone and never go near stolen goods. His greed don't stop, Goodwin said, with the strictness of a Mithrin priest speaking for the good of our souls. Could I but catch one of his bookkeepers and make him sing, we might be able to roll the monster up. Speaking of monsters, what was that gabble about the shadow snake? I've been wondering about that myself, Tunstall said. Crookshank's so cracked with grief he's making up baby's tale creepies. He's got the idea someplace, Goodwin said. I'd been hearing a fight for the last moment. As we walked along, Amat shouts and children shrieks, then a cove bellowed. We heard crockery shatter in the building just to the left. Someone screamed, Gotta save them! She's got a blade! Come on, Jack, stop her before she does your babes! Amat yelled, She's cursed near done him! Shutter flew open on the ground floor. A cove leaned out. He looked around and saw us. She says she'll crop the little knobs, and she's a knife in her hand, 2 stories up. That was dude. Try that again. A shutter flew up on the ground, open on the ground floor. A cove leaned out. He looked around and saw us. She says she'll crop the little's knobs, and she's a knife in her hand, 2 stories up. Goodwin and Tunstall traded looks. No dog likes to be caught in a family brawl, but if the neighbors were right, the Smot was threatening to cut her baby's heads off. They charged through the house's doorless entry and up the rickety steps, me at their heels. We had to shove our way past clumps of neighbors at both landings. None of them wanted to get caught in this, not when knives were involved. They did point to the door where the worst of the noise came through. It was the babble of children pleading for their mothers to stop, to be nice. They told her they loved her. She screamed she would cut their throats if they didn't shut their jobs. The cove was telling her to calm down. In the name of the king's law, Tunstall shouted as he tried the latch. The door wasn't locked. He shoved it open, showing up a middling-sized main room. Here was their hearth and table and the children's pallets. The little one stood in a corner on the far side of the window, 2 girls and a toddling boy in a dirty napkin. Her papa stood closer to us, near the tiny hearth in the wall. Between them, at the corner of the room, was the woman. She had a long knife in her hand, and she swayed where she stood. I could see her small brown eyes flicking quick like a bird's from Goodwin to Tunstall. My dog spread apart to make it look like she could dart between them to reach the door. I was in that opening, but she might think she could shove by me. The oldest of the little ones had a black eye. Another had a scratched face. The cove had blood on his face from cuts around one eye. His lip was split and his patched shirt ripped. From the broken crockery at his feet, she had thrown a jug at him. I knew by the vinegar and mint smell that it had held hot blood wine. Goodwin sighed and scratched her head. Mistress, what do you think you're doing? She asked. You've gone and upset your neighbors. We can't have you disturbing the king's peace. Your man will need a healer for those cuts, and you know what healers cost these days. Added to that, you'll have the cost of the magistrate's fine. Don't make it worse for yourself. Put the blade down, come with us. The Mott replied with a suggestion so Fala was impressed. Goodwin didn't even twitch. That's very nice. The blade, mistress. What's your name? She cursed us again. Orva, the cove told us wearily. You've gone too far this time. Put down the knife and do as you're told. I hadn't seen her other hand or guessed she might have something in it. Like a little stone mortar they'd used for grinding herbs. I saw it now when she threw it at her man's head. Tunstall knew it was there because he caught it easily. and Goodwin knew that it was there, and that Tonksel would catch it because she lunged for Orva's arm, the one holding the knife. The Mott was quick enough to have been a good dog. I saw her move as Goodwin lunged. Orva struck backhand, her fist turned sideways. She caught Goodwin with the butt of the hilt square on the hinge of her jaw. Goodwin dropped. Her eyes rolled up in her head. The children screamed, then Tonksel said very quietly, "Orva, you struck a dog with a blade." She turned and leapt through the unshuttered window. I went after her. I didn't even think, or it might have occurred to me, that I was jumping to a pair of broken legs or a broken back. It turned out this window opened onto stairs that went down the outside of the house. I hit on the landing with a jarring of my ankles. Orva was racing down those stairs. I scrambled to my feet and followed. She took me through the cesspool, alley by alley, through puddles of slop and hollows of mud. The only light leaked from the open doors of drinking dens and brothels. Hot blood wine filled with herbs kept Orva going long after a mere drunk would have dropped. I slipped and stumbled into a tumble-down fence somewhere behind the court of the rogue. Orva was nowhere in view. I blinked, listening for her running steps rather than trusting my eyes. I heard a rustle of cloth behind me and jumped away just as she thrust that knife through the gap in the fence behind me. She had circled around. I found the opening she used and darted through. She was off again, plunging between two dark houses. I was closing the gap between us when she dove into the back door of a tavern. I followed, ignoring curses and swerving to avoid a cook chopping rats for stew meat. I dodged a serving girl who tried to smack me with a wooden tankard. In the common room, Orva made for the door, jumping over drunks and showing her knife to the ones who didn't get the message. I saw my chance and leaped onto the tables as a shortcut to the door. I ignored the yells of fury. I was a dog in pursuit. If those tosspots couldn't see my uniform under the muck, then they could see the baton in my hand. Orva was through the door just before I reached it. She slammed it shut. The bar on the inside thumped down the moment the slam shook it from its position. I wrestled the bar up and got the door open in time to see Orva turn a corner half a block away. Red torches from a cockfight lit that part of the street. She took me through another drinking den. The third time I skidded around to the front door. She came dashing through. I swung my baton around and straight into her middle. She doubled over, dropping the knife. I kicked it out of the way and wrenched one of her arms up behind her. Back. "Kneel," I said between gasps of her air. "I arrest you in the name of the king." As a puppy, I wasn't really allowed to arrest someone, but I doubted that Orva knew as much. She wailed, "I didn't do it. I didn't." She wailed, "I didn't do nothing. Why didn't you let me go?" She was even more out of breath than I was, her head lolled on her neck. "Orva, you struck a dog," I reminded the stupid drunken creature. I tightened my grip. "Now will you kneel, or will I dump you on your front?" "I want to see my children," she whined. With a sigh, I levered my strength down on her captive arm. She had to kneel or get an elbow broken. I didn't want to use my baton in case some looby decided to help her. As it was, people were coming out of the tavern and gathering on the street to watch. Orva knelt, babbling about her little ones. I thought that if they and their papa had any sense, they would be halfway to Barzoon by now. But I wouldn't bet a copper that Papa and the little ones wouldn't beg the magistrate to free Orva. I tied her wrists with my rawhide cords, their first use. Then I had used a pair of cords to tie her ankles so she could walk, but not so well that she wouldn't fall as she tried to run again. Not that I thought she might. Her legs trembled even worse than mine. I looked at my surroundings. Mythros, we'd come almost to the north gate. There was no point in going back to her house. Tonksel would have taken Goodwin in for care. He'd know I would report back to Jane Street if we were separated. So Jane Street was where we'd go. Orva was bound for the cages anyway. I looked for the knife. Someone had taken it. "I want that blade, and I want it now," I said, feeling more than a little cross. It was easier to talk with my face in the shadow and a dog's uniform, even a puppy's, on my body. "It's evidence in a crime in the king's name." Some of the watchers chuckled. I gripped my baton hard. Did I have the strength to break a few heads like a good dog to make my point, or should I just let it go? Then, to my surprise, a little one came forward with a knife and offered it to me. "I didn't mean no harm by it, guardswoman," he, or maybe she, mumbled. I swallowed an odd feeling in my throat. I'd never been called guardswoman before. "All right, then," I said, sounding properly gruff in my own ears. "You've done your duty." The child touched a knuckle to his or her forehead for respect and went back into the crowd. Still feeling strange, maybe even proud, I poked Orva with my baton. "Walk," I told her, "and walk silent." The crowd parted so we could pass through. Now that I was calming down, I could feel every bone in my feet because each of them hurt. It was going to be a fearful long trip back to Jane Street. It was well past supper time, and my belly was growling by the time I hauled Orva into the kennel. Only the threat of my baton and a ride part way on the chance-met wagon had brought her this far. He had the gall to drop to her knees and cry, "Thank the goddess!" When we walked through the door. "I'm weary to death." I swore never to turn into one of those dogs who hit their rats as easy as talking to them. I was sore tempted, though. We were halfway to Ahuda's desk before I thought to look for Goodwin and Tunstall. They were in the corner by the healer's room. The beds inside were full. Tunstall watched as the healer worked her magic on Goodwin's swollen face. Then all three of them turned to stare at me. Tunstall's mouth fell open. I looked around the room. Everyone there. Dogs on duty, visitors for those in the cages, hangers-on, gaped at me and my first captive rat. Then I heard Ahuda high on her perch say, "Great Mythos bless us, you actually caught her?" I was so startled I looked at the sergeant. "Wasn't catching her what I was supposed to do?" She hit a dog with a blade," I stammered. Tunstall came over, and I didn't even have to say fetch. "Here we were thinking you were not but a fish puppy, and you turn out to be one stubborn little terrier." Ahuda was shaking her head as she opened the thick arrest book. "Lock up!" she yelled. "Rat coming in!" "I want to see my children," Orva whined. "I want my Jack. He'll be telling you." "Shut your gob," said Ahuda. I thought I'd seen her at her worst when she dealt with us trainees. I was wrong. "You'll tell me nothing in my kennel. Here I am, queen bitch, and you will muzzle yourself." She turned to the cage dogs. "Get her out of my hair. She stinks of hot blood wine. And make sure Cooper gets her cords back, uncut. If you have to cut them, give her good replacements." She turned to me now. "Cooper, you don't leave till you get one or the other and sign in my supply book to claim which one. Claim which. Cords cost money." I struggled so hard with that sentence. My knees were frightful wobbly from work and from talking before all those pairs of eyes. "Yes, Sergeant." Ahuda pursed her lips. "Sit, girl, before you fall. Over by the healers. Tunstall, get her a cup of that restorative tea, the one that tastes like hay." I sat on one of the benches near the healers' rooms. Then I had to change positions. Tunstall was pointing me to seat directly across from Goodwin and the healer who tended her jaw. I took a quick glance as I settled into the new place. A huge bruise went from Goodwin's cheekbone under her chin on that side, but there was no swelling. The healer stood back and looked at it. "You'll be sore for some days, and you'll need to eat on the other side, but given you'd cracked jaw and not the size of a walnut, you'd best not complain. You're lucky I do bone so well, or you wouldn't talk for a week. What were you hit with, a hammer?" "The hilt of a butcher's knife," Tunstall said, when Goodwin opened her mouth and winced. "I don't suppose you have it, puppy." Given all her whining and foot dragging, I needed a hand that didn't hold the baton to keep order moving. Thrusting the knife into my belt would have meant the tip pricked my thighs. I reached inside my tunic and fished it out. I'd prayed all the way to the kennel that I wouldn't fall and stab myself. "Mythros," whispered Tunstall. "That thing's a pig sticker." Goodwin smiled crookedly and beckoned for the knife. I gave it to her hilt first. It was black, heavy wood at the hilt. The thing had been valuable once, before 1,000 sharpenings had made the blade as thin as lockpick. The healer whistled, looking at it. "The mother blessed you tonight, godswoman. Had this struck you a little harder, your jaw might have well shattered beyond my skill." I still got my cup of tea. I looked at it, wishing I had the gumption to ask for food instead. You're starving. And so am I, Goodwin said. Knock that back and we'll go get supper. Soft foods for you, the healer warned Goodwin. May I feed our puppy now? Goodwin asked with frightful patience. She deserves a treat. I looked at her shocked. Don't worry, Tunxel assured me. She'll get over it eventually. I hope so. I couldn't have Goodwin changing her nature on me from day to day. I like to know where I stood with people. Most of the usual dog trade had been and gone by the time we reached the mantle and pullet. Now my legs ached. I hoped it wasn't the run. As a message runner, I had covered the city at a trot. I'd hate to think I was so out of trim. True, even a run from Unicorn District to the palace was not the same as chasing a half-mad female to the cesspool and dragging her back to James Street. Tunxel beckoned one of the server girls over. A quiet room, he said. Silver passed from his hand to hers. No fuss about it, he added. Server girl led us into a narrow hall. Along one side were 4 doors covered with flimsy curtains. He pointed us through the third. He ordered our food. Poor Goodwin requested peas porridge, which made the girl take a step back. Once she'd brought it all, she closed the wooden door behind the flimsy curtains. No magic in these rooms, Tunxel told me as he cut a thick slice of ham into tiny pieces. The hostess paid extra to make sure of it. He looked at Goodwin as she poked the contents of her bowl. Mayhap you should go home after this, Clary. Leave me and Cooper to finish the night. Cursed if I will, she muttered. We'll go back to the cesspool. If I get to break some heads, I'll cheer up. If you bang your jaw, you won't be cheery, Tunxel warned. Cooper, take more of them parsnips. You need some meat on your bones. Mother hen, Goodwin said. Will you gabble till the giants return, or will you show us what that canny lad Rosso foisted from Crookshank? Tunxel asked. Then slowly and with great care he buttered a fat roll bursting with nuts and raisins and ate it, making sounds of delight. Goodwin swiftly took a spoonful of porridge, levered it back with her free hand, and released it like a catapult. The porridge flew to land on Tunxel's forehead. I covered my mouth with both hands that I might not giggle. The toughest dogs in the city still have some play in them. Tunxel used an unbuttered piece of roll to wipe his forehead. He popped a roll and porridge into his mouth. You've been practicing, he mumbled with a mouthful. Goodwin smirked and dug in her breeches pocket. Don't torture me with what I can't eat, Mats, he warned. Not with my belly growling like menagerie bears. She fetched out the leather pouch as Tunxel and me shoved plates aside. She spilled out 5 stones. They were like the rock in my breeches pocket. When Tunxel drew the oil lamp closer, they showed brilliant splashes of color. One had a bulge of glass-like stuff. Within the glass were dark orange flecks, some clear patches, and a strip of deep green blaze. He had a lump of clear stuff the size of my thumb. In the lamplight it flashed lilac blue and palest orange. Another threw off green fire in a rippling strip along its spine. A 4th shone with tiny yellow, green, and blue sparkles. A 5th showed spots that looked like deep glass wells, one green, one dark blue. Oh, got to get a mage, Goodwin said. Tunxel, we need you-know-who, first thing tomorrow. Tunxel raised his eyebrows. You're certain? Goodwin nodded. She gently slid each stone back into the pouch. We've seen plenty of gems in our day. Mats, these are different. Goddess, my jaw hurts. Crookshank took these to Cafer. You think he meant to bribe the rogue? He went about it strangely, Tunxel offered. Goodwin, the tiniest bit of ham on the tip of... Tunxel offered Goodwin the tiniest bit of ham on the tip of his knife. He took it, chewing carefully. One of the chiefs, I asked? I didn't look at them for fear they might scowl. Then I heard Goodwin say, Go on. Owl Waterfront. He helped the guards take Crookshank away last night. I drew patterns in the gravy on my plate. In my mind's eye, I saw the big red-headed Dawal chivvy the rushers along. Since when does one of the rogue's own chiefs take out the trash? For me, I'd worry more that Crookshank might remember me when he got feet under him again. Tunxel rested his chin on his hand. Good point. Dawal's first among the chiefs. All them waterfront troughs to call on. All those waterfront troughs to crawl on. Goodwin said, strong fellow, when he was moving cargo in Port Kane, he'd knock an oxen down for bet money. He can stand a few challenges if he's rogue. Crookshank's money. He could buy some of the other chiefs, Tunstall said. Enough to overset Kafer, though? Might Kafer actually claim to be the Shadow Snake, I asked. If he did, and he killed Roland, the chiefs might turn on him. Crookshank could buy them then. You believe that? Goodwin asked. No, Crookshank's been at the bottle to yelp with the snake. My nursey told me that one. Waits at the crossroads and swallows bad children. It's a boogie story, Cooper. You never heard it? Of course I'd heard the Shadow Snake. I just never known anyone cracked or hard enough to use the name for anything, let alone the murderer of a child. Someone calls himself a Shadow Snake to do business, Tunstall said, thinking out loud. They use the boogie story to put the fear into him, pay Crookshank back for something. The old man's up to his skull in enemies. Now he knows someone's out there who's so full of hate they'll not stop at child murder. So Crookshank pays to buy all kinds of guards. But he doesn't trust the rogue. He thinks the rogue is the Shadow Snake, I said. And he's got enough coin to buy one of the rogue's chiefs. That's a lot of coin, even for Crookshank. Where's it from? I'm betting it's these rocks, Goodwin said as Tunstall picked up the leather bag. What are they? How'd Crookshank come by 'em? Too many questions. I don't like questions. Dogs don't like questions, I said, the first half of the saying. Tunstall finished it with me as he stuffed the bag inside his tunic. Dogs like answers. Goodwin asked, what do Roscoe want of you, Cooper? While we were up greasing Kafer's vanity. I spat out a mouthful of buttered greens beside my bowl so I wouldn't talk with my mouth full. He wanted to bribe me to know what was in that leather bag. How much? Tunstall asked. A silver noble, I told him. A silver noble. I told him no, I replied. Goodwin slapped the back of my head smartly. I gaped at her. Don't be a fool, wench. 1.5. And you tell him. Then split the takings with us. That's how it works, Tunstall said. Personal bribes don't go in the happy bags. They're for the dogs who earn them. Sooner or later, word of these stones will get you out. Stones will get out. You will... Sooner or later, word of these stones will get out. So we'll control who hears of them. Then we follow the rumors. Maybe learn something. Never turn down a bribe, Cooper. It's bad for business. Bad for you and bad for us, because we get half of everything you get. We train you, after all. Folk don't trust the dog what don't get bought. Goodwin told me. You're too good to be bought. They start thinking maybe you got some other angle. Or some other master. Then it gets bloody, Tunstall said. Tunstall stuffed the sweet meat into his mouth. I ate the vegetables I'd spat out. I never waste food. No sense letting you get yourself killed if we're putting work into you, Goodwin said, glaring at her bowl. This Roscoe, if he survives, might be a good connection. A Nicky and Cora, too. The rogue don't kill them for being too good, Tunstall reminded us both. Eat up, girls. We still have the rest of the suspect to control. I stood. I heard crackling. I'd forgotten about my clothes. They were covered in dried muck. I'd need the bathhouse at the end of my watch again. I'd need to pay a laundress to get these gummy stains from my uniform. My hoard of coins dwindled in my mind's eye. I'd saved plenty for my allowance at Provost's house, and the tips I'd made as a runner, but buying furnishings and taking rooms ate into it. Laundry and baths ate still more. I put it from my mind. I had to be alert on the streets, doubly so if Goodwin's pain distracted her. The mage's healing was all very well, but after a point, the dog's body had to do the rest. That bruise looked like it hurt. So on we went as the clock chimed 11. Once more I stood by and watched as Goodwin and Tunstall broke up tavern fights. Finally, it was time to return to Jane Street. If Goodwin's pain had an effect on her work, I did not see it. My sole bit of excitement was when one loogie crashed into me. I tripped him with my baton and smacked his ankles so he'd remember me. My legs were filled with nails by the time we mustered off watch. The thought of reaching a bathhouse was as lowering as paying for it. Once we told Ohuda that we'd finished our bit of evening alive, she dismissed us. I was about to drag myself out the door when Goodwin put a hand on my arm. She gave me a circle of wood with the Provost mark on one side and her name on the other. Where's the dog's bathhouse, Cooper? I blinked at the piece of wood. Stormwing Street, right around the corner. I was so weary, the marks on the wood smeared my vision. Goodwin was sore too. I had to listen hard to understand her because her jaw was so stiff. Good puppy. Go there, show him this. Tell the attendants I said clean you and your clothes and give you a spare uniform for tomorrow. Yours will need soaking. He thrust a piece of wood under my face. Take it, Cooper. They won't let you in a dog's bathhouse till you're no puppy unless you've got one of these. But I can't afford. I reached for my purse. A spare uniform cost money. I'd have to take the coin from my food budget. I couldn't take it from rent or my pigeon money. Those birds are my informants. Pay me your share of Roscoe's bribe if it makes you feel better. Goodwin snapped. I don't need a bathhouse. I'm going home to let my man scrub my back, and you need a spare uniform if you're going to keep getting muck on you. Now scat. I wanted to argue, but pride is something only folk with money can afford. I scatted. As I moved off, I heard Tunstall ask, all the bribe money? That's hard. I'm short of coin this month, Goodwin said, her voice tart. Maybe she'll be wise and make him pay her 2 silver nobles, keep the extra half for herself. The bathhouse attendant made me leave my clothes in the rinsing room. I wore a robe to the hot pools. Dogs were coming in, looking strange without the uniforms. 2 of them started to come toward me. Each time an attendant grabbed their arms and whispered in their ears. Did they tell their friends that I was here with Goodwin's permission, or just to let the fish puppy swim alone? Once I'd soaped and rinsed my hair, I slumped on my underwater bench until I was hidden up to my lips. If they couldn't recognize me, they wouldn't think about me. The next thing I knew, the attendant was shaking my shoulder. The dogs had gone. He lifted me out. I was pink and wrinkled like a new babe she'd found. A spare uniform and stitched on white trim while I slept. He even helped me dress. I found a couple of coppers for a tip, but she pushed them away. I managed to walk to my rooms. Pounce jumped to my shoulder as I let myself in, leaping on and off me as I undressed. He talked like mad and playing cat, attacking my braid as I had stripped off my clothes and got into my nightshirt. At last I fell into my wonderful bed, curling up under my divine blankets to write in this journal. Somehow I woke up enough for that, as if I lived the day afresh to record it. Now, though, my eyelids are heavy. Pounce is purring in my ear. It's a smooth sound. I will end this before I sleep and get winking on everything. On the whole, a better day. And that's it for now. Thank you so much, guys, for hanging out with me and for listening to me read that book. Tell me in the comments if you think I'm reading too fast or if my voice is very monotone. I feel like I'm super monotone and reading way too fast. I'm sick, though, so trying to catch my breath is what's making me think I'm reading too fast. But please leave a comment in the comments. Let me know if you think I am reading too fast and if I'm super monotone to you. Thanks again for being here. I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.